So when you're actually saving something in the database, you'll have a check to see if that user is 13 or older. So on your form, you have that drop down. You only have options of 13 or older. You click that. That shouldn't be the only safeguard that you have to ensure that users are over the age of 13 or 13 years of older, because there are definitely ways hackers can, when you click that send button, they can intercept that request, change the parameters or the inputs of that field, of any field, and then send it to the backend. So, and then once it goes to the backend, your Django app, before it actually saves to the database, you want to do additional checks, because once it passes through and is saved in your database, then it's done. Then that data is there forever, or not necessarily forever, but you can't clean it anymore. So you want to make sure that there's multiple layers of security in your applications, from the front end to the back end, all the way right before it actually saves to the query or saves to the database. You actually want to perform a check. And those are called validators. You want to validate the fields in your models to make sure that whatever data is being input in there is only the data that you actually want to be stored into the database. And it's like the last line of defense for before data is actually saved in your database. Does anybody have any questions on like that, and how, like, why that we have these things called validators that will validate the data right before it actually gets saved into the database? Nope. All right. So in today's challenge or today's lecture, we're actually going to be creating a couple validators, and then you'll be actually writing a little more robust validators in today's challenges. But before we do that, before we actually get to writing validators, let's start and create a Django app or Django project from scratch, going through the motions of, creating a project, installing all the dependencies, creating a new app, connecting that Postgres database to the Django project, writing our models, and then go ahead and writing our validators. So first things first, let's go ahead. I'm going to just make a directory called Django validator lecture. Validator lecture. All right. So I want to create, what's the first thing before I even create a Django project? What should I be doing?
Create a virtual environment.
Yep. So I'm going to Python make venv. All right. Let's list that all out. All right. So now let's activate that environment. I'm going to do source venv bin activate. I'm in my virtual environment. I'm going to pip install Django. I'm going to be using a Postgres database, so I'm going to use psycopg2 or psycopg2. Uh-oh, what happened? Did I spell it wrong? Yep, I probably did. There we go. So I'm installing Django and psycopg2. All right, great. So I'm inside my virtual environment. I've installed Django and psycopg2. Now let's go ahead and create a new project called Twitter project or Twitter proj. So I can do Django admin. Is it start project? Does it, what's the command for it?
Start project.
Start, is it one word?
Yeah. Yes.
Start project. I'm just going to call it Twitter project. So I'm just going to kind of like create like a Twitter, the clone type of thing. All right. I'll list everything out. I've got my Twitter project. Oh, crap. So let's actually open this up into a new VS Code window. anytime I'm in a virtual environment and it reloads VS Code, I'm going to have to reactivate my virtual environment. But notice how this Twitter project is like a nested. I also have like a Twitter project down here. So this is where all the files I want. Up to you how you want this. If this is like the file structure you want. I don't like it. So I'm going to delete that Twitter project. I'm going to source env bin activate just to go back into my virtual environment. And I'm going to go back up to my Twitter project or to start a new Django project. And I'm going to do Django-admin start project Twitter _ project space period. And that essentially doesn't make this whole Django project nested anymore. So notice how the manage.py file is on the same level as the virtual environment. That's just kind of how I want it to my directory, because everything is already located in this Django validator lecture directory. All right, so I created a Django project. Now let's go ahead and create a Django app. So a Python manage.py start app. I'm going to call it just Twitter _ app. Uh-oh, what happened? What did it say? No module. Django. Why not?
Was it supposed to be Twitter project right there at the end? And you did Twitter app?
No, because I'm creating an app now. Couldn't import. Let's just make sure pip install Django.
Hey,
Is it-
Tom, I've seen this before. Sometimes the virtual environment gets screwed up. You might want to deactivate, reactivate if it's still kind of wonky.
Okay. I just installed uppercase Django. I don't know why that. Let's just run that. Probably. Okay. For whatever reason, I did uppercase Django. I don't know why that is.
It looks like when you were installing the Django and the Cycop G2, it didn't install either one of them.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. That makes sense. Cool. So, all right, fix that. So now I've got my Twitter project and I've got my Twitter app. So next, what I want to do is connect my Twitter app to my Twitter project. So I'm coming down here to installed apps. I'm going to do Twitter _ app. I'm going to put a comma there for future developers so they don't mess up. And I could use the built-in SQLite database just to keep things simple because we're not doing anything crazy today, but just to get into the habit of creating Postgres databases, I'm going to create a DB called Twitter _ DB just for Twitter database. Now I can connect that Twitter database to my Postgres. I'm sorry, this Twitter Postgres database to my Twitter project, Django project, because I'm going to use Postgres, and I'm going to call that, and the name of that database, the Postgres database, is Twitter DB. And I can see that just to make sure I can do Twitter DB, and I've got my Twitter Postgres database there. I don't have any models, or I didn't create any models, so I don't have any tables in there. All right. Now, let's go to our Twitter app. This is where our application is going to reside. This is where our models are going to be. I'm going to write some tests in here as well, just so we can get kind of familiar with writing test cases. You'll rarely be actually writing test cases in here, but I'm just going to do it for the sake of this lecture. So for our models, I'm going to create, since I'm creating like a Twitter application, I'm debating what should I call this model if I wanted to create like a user.
User.
Yep, I can call it user. So we're going to get into this later on, starting tomorrow, Thursday. Well, I guess we're off Thursday, but like Friday and going forward, Django already has a built-in user model. And we'll get into that, but you can override that model, that built-in user model, by creating your own user model. So I'm just going to create a user model. It's going to inherit from the models class, and this user model is going to have a first name, models.char field, not just keep things simple, max length, just 255. Same with the last name. I'll do a like Twitter handle. I don't know what the max length of that is going to be, maybe 100. It's going to have an email. Models dot, looks like Django has a built-in email field. That's kind of nice. We can see what that does. Does anybody know what the email field does?
I'm assuming it has like built-in validators.
Let's see.
I would agree, but say that it probably only looks for the @ symbol.
Nope. So just looking for an @ symbol isn't enough to validate an actual email. There's other things you have to validate for, because what if it just had like @ symbol @.com? Is that a valid email address? So you'd have to have specific specific other things to check to validate your email. So an email field is a char field that checks the value is a valid email address using the email validator. Let's open that up. So allow list of email domains by default regular expression domain regex attribute is used to validate whatever appears after the @ sign. So it looks for an @ sign and it looks for whatever's after the @ sign. So you can kind of look into what it is. Deprecated, since the whitelist parameter is deprecated. I don't know what the whitelist is. Use allow list instead. So the domain allow list might actually have like specific yeah, I don't know actually. Anyway, so yeah, the email field, kind of nice, already validates some emails. Max length, we can make that 100 as well. We can have an age. We can do models, make this an integer field like so. And account type, we're going to make a paid version of a free version and a paid version of Twitter, because that blue check mark, if you want that blue check mark, we're going to have to say you're going to have to pay $2 a month or something. And that char field, we're going to have a max length of 4 because we want this to be a paid or a free account. So those are the only two types we want the users to be able to select when they go ahead and sign up. All right. So now we've got our user model, and when a user goes and logs in or signs up, must be older. Right when a user signs up, we want to validate these fields, some of these fields. So let's like validate the age and account type. So right before when a user signs up, click submit. runs through some business logic, and right before it actually saves to the database, we want to validate to make sure the age is at least 13 years or older. We can do that through Django validators. So a validator is a callable that takes a value and raises a validation error if it doesn't meet some criteria. Validators can be useful for reusing validation logic between different types of fields. So, for example, if we want to validate whether or not this even field is an even number or an even integer, looks like we have a parameter validators equals this validate even, and this validate even is a function or a method that takes in whatever value we're trying to save into that field and runs some logic and checks. So reading the docs right here, we can validate even. So let's actually just copy this. And we can kind of apply that to here, to this integer field. So integer view validate even, or validators. What is it? Validators. Equals, and we're just going to call this validate validate age. And this validate age is going to be a method that takes in, let's just call it the age. And let's run, if age is less than 13, let's raise a validation error. And whoop, what did I just do? And we can say value is not an even number, but we can say, we can kind of like write whatever we want. Values. I'm going to actually change this text get validation error. Validation error. I'm going to change this. Get lazy. I'm going to say as text, and we can call that whatever we want, but it is really a text. I'm going to say, give it an F type and say, you need to be at least 13 years of age, or you need to be 13 years of age or older. You currently are age years old. So if somebody tries to sign up with an age less than 13, it's going to run through this validators validate age. It's going to pass in that whatever that user input into here. It's going to check this, see if the user is at least, or we're going to check to see if age is less than 13. If they are, that means they're too young. They can't sign up for my new Twitter clone, and it's going to raise this validation error. And it's not going to be able to save in the database. So if you run that, yep.
Can that function definition go inside class user?
Like down here?
Yes. And I guess, yeah, that's right. That's what I'm thinking. Or does that not make sense? Or does that even?
It can, but we want to be able to use this validate age somewhere else, if in like other models as well, if we ever need to. So this
Cool,
validate,
thank you.
So in theory, we want to be able to use this validator in other models as well. But yeah, you can write validators within your model. So we've got this validate age. Now let's go ahead and create a couple of tests for it. Let's see. So,
Hey, Tom, I have a question.
yep.
What's that import get text lazy as text? Why is that there?
I don't know. It has something to do with Django. You can read the documentation. Get lazy text. It's a translator. I think it just translates it into like there's a default translator method for a particular file. Let's see. Where is it? Yeah, it doesn't really give me a good message as to what that does. But from what I understand, it just turns it into like some kind of text.
Okay, we just need it there.
Yeah, it'll throw like an error. There's like weird things that will happen if you don't have that. But yeah. Anyway. Again, Django has some weird built-in methods that you have to use for whatever reason. So let's actually go ahead and create a test for this integer field. So I've got inside of my Django app, inside the tests, we can go ahead and create, let's go ahead and import from models, import the user model. And we're also going to import the Django validation error as well. So I'm going to create a test app user test inherits the test case class from Django. And I'm going to do def test 01 create user self. And here I'm going to create a new user instance. So I'm going to create a new user where first name equals, Tom. Last name equals Preet. What else do we have? Handle equals at Tom Preet. Email tom@email.com. You do age, say I'm 12 years old trying to sign up, and the account type is free initially. So I created a new user and I'm going to try and save that into the database. And I'm going to try, remember the try accepts. So I'm going to try new user. And in Django, right before a user instance is saved in the database, it runs this method called FullClean. And if we look at the documentation, FullClean does three different things, right? Three different things on this new user instance. So if I look at FullClean, so there's 3 steps in validating a model. Validate the model fields, so right when it tries to save, it runs clean fields. So it validates the model fields, validates the model as a whole, it runs clean, and it validates the field uniqueness by running model validate _unique. All 3 of those steps are performed when you run this FullClean method. So when I run this FullClean, it runs all these methods to make sure that they make sure that this user satisfies all the field requirements and any validators, any validations, any model validations before it's actually saved. And if it's not, it's going to run self assert true. Let's do an F string. What does it say? I need to do this. In validation error as E. And so let's just quickly walk through what's going on here. So this test will create a new user instance. I'm assigning that new user instance to a new user variable. And after I do that, I run this FullClean method on that user instance to make sure that, hey, all these fields meet the requirements of this user model. And if it is, that's great. It's safe to store in the database. If it doesn't meet these requirements, like if the age is not 13 years or older, it will throw a validation error. Or if the email isn't an email address, it'll throw a validation error. And for this one, I'm just testing create user age under minimum. So this just makes sure that the user, that it actually throws an error if the user is under the age of 13. So here the age is 12. Hopefully when I run Python manage.py test, it passes this test. So let's run that. Hopefully it works. Uh-oh.
Greg, I've got a question.
Yeah, hold on.
Sorry, Tom.
Yep. Go ahead.
So I'm looking at some other documentation for this section, and there's a clean field name, as in, like, you know, for our example that we've got going on here, we would be using like clean underscore age. Is there, like, is that just not used, I guess, functions? Or like, am I looking at
What are you?
incorrect stuff for old documentation?
What are you referring to?
So I'm looking at, I'm on the Django project website, and looking at form and field validation.
Okay.
And so it's talking about the clean methods. And one of the things that it lists is clean underscore and then
The name of the field.
name. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can use
Yeah.
that.
So
I don't know about that specifically. Yep.
okay. I guess I was asking if there was a difference in which has a better use case.
I don't know, actually. So it looks like I'm getting an error here. Does anybody know what the issue is? What errors why I'm getting these errors? What haven't I done yet?
Oh, migrated the model.
Yep. So again, super easy to forget when you have to run through all these steps. So I'm going to do Python manage.py make migrations. Cool. Created a model user. Now I can migrate that. So what it did was create a migration script right here. This initial, this is what that Twitter app migration 0001 initial. So that's what this created. And essentially this code, when I run that Python manage.py migrate, we'll run this code, convert this to raw SQL and insert it into my database. So I'm going to do Twitter underscore app. So I want to migrate just the Twitter app user model. There we go. So I'm gonna clear that and run that test again. Hopefully it still works. What did it say? Test Twitter database. Would you like to deleting the test database? Sure. Cool.
Are we supposed to make a database first? Before you migrate?
I think didn't I not create the, I already did Twitter _DB. So yeah, I created that already. So let's run that test
Alright.
again. So it ran that test, it passed it, but let's actually look at this error. So error E, let's look at what this validation error as E looks like. So run that test. It says it's error. This is the field that it erred on, age. You need to be 13 years of age or older. You currently are 12 years old. So see, I'm currently 12. If I wanted to change that to, 15, if I ran that, that also passed the test because it ran FullClean and it allowed me to save it into the database.
I got a quick question on that.
Yep.
So you made your validator and you have it in your model when you set your age. Is your validator being ran when you try to create that record, or is it running because you use FullClean?
It's running because I ran FullClean.
Okay.
Oh crap. Oh. Yep. All right, that's what's going on here now. Oh, okay. So I'm just going to delete that. You can also run, let's create another test to make sure that a user is meets minimum age. So again, I can run like 17, clear. Ran 2 tests, I passed them. So
Tom, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused on these, the test cases here. In the first one, we're making sure the test is like, we're testing our validator is what we're testing right now. We're testing that if we try to put in an age less than 13, that we're going to get that assert message. Is that what we're testing?
yeah,
So if we put in an age, like in our test, okay, I guess I see it. As long as if we put in an age over 13, like 15, shouldn't we fail the test then? Wouldn't that say the validator
I see
isn't
what,
working?
I see what you're saying, but like the validator would still work. So I'm wondering.
But we wouldn't get the error in that case,
We
right?
wouldn't get
And
the
so-
error in that case. Yeah. Test under minimum age.
So that no assertion would happen. So basically the test would there's no assertion for the true case. So in that case, we just wouldn't even it wouldn't even throw anything. Is that what would go on? Like if we didn't have that second test?
Right. Yeah. So that's why
Okay.
I had that second test. Oh, whoops. I think this is supposed to be 2, but yeah.
And then just to piggyback on that last question that was asked, is the clean, that FullClean, does that run when we do a save? Like if we just do a save, does FullClean end up getting run, or do you have to literally call this FullClean and then save for these validators to run?
So if you run just save in like your terminal, it won't run the FullClean. So it'll bypass that. But when your Django app, when you're writing the business logic to save it, it should run the FullClean before everything is saved.
just, and I apologize. I am like I'm pretty slow. I'm
No,
feeling kind of
you're
dumb here,
fine.
but
No.
just so you're saying so we actually we need to call the full clean function before we save. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? Like, so in our code, I want to save somebody to, like, somebody fills out a form. I want to save their information in the database. I should be doing the full clean and then I should do the save. Is that what you're saying, to make sure these validators?
I believe if you want, I could be wrong, but if you want to validate everything, you should be running the full clean before you actually save it.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yep. Yes. All right. So we validate the age. We wrote our own custom validator here. Let's go ahead and also validate this char field as well, this account type, because a user can just, let's actually write a test for that. Well, let's actually write let's, I guess, write the test for that first. If a user types in another value that's at least 4 characters long, but it's not paid or free, let's actually let's throw like an error. So def test 03 account underscore type and self let's just go ahead and same user, because we have free, and let's do that try full clean. And that's actually run, say like something else. What's a 4-letter word? Nope. So
just asked a room full of military people what a 4-letter word.
just joking. All right. So when it runs this should not work. It should say, please enter valid account type. So let's create a validator for that called def validate account type. Account takes in an account type, and it should be able to take in paid or free. So again, this is just like a normal basic method, and that takes in one argument, account type. Just FYI, you can't pass in multiple arguments in validators like so. You can only take in one argument, which is the whatever is being input into this field. So we can say like valid account types equals paid and free. And we can say if account type not in valid account types, we can raise a validation error like so, but instead of I guess it'd be please enter valid account type. Just looking there. Yeah, because we want the same message to be displayed. And down in here, we can add in a validators equals validate account type. So let's clear that. Let's run that test. Hopefully it passed. All right. So we've got a valid account type right here, validate age, but just like kind of how we discovered here, this email field, like what is it? Email validator Django. Django has a bunch of built-in validators because there's a lot of things that developers in the past would have to validate. And there's some very common ones that common scenarios where we might have to validate a minimum age or something like that, or a maximum age or the maximum account type. So Django has some built-in common validators. So if you look at validators over here on the right-hand side, we have that email validator, which is what this email field automatically runs that email validator on. And we also have this min value validator and max value, min max length validator, min length validator, decimal validator. There's a bunch of them. So in place of this validate age validator, we can get rid of this and use this min value validator. So we can do that, just do that. And instead of validate age, min value, we just type in what's the minimum value we want to validate for this field. And we'd have to import that. We can do from Django core validators, import all the validators or just the minimum value validator. I'm going to go ahead and make migrations again, just to make sure that. Uh-oh. Validate age. Where is my at? Twitter app models has no attribute validate age.
Commented it out. Yeah.
Is that the reason why? The hell? What's going on? Let's actually go back. All right, so Twitter underscore app. All right, now let's go ahead and add that minimum value validator back. Why is that doing that? Oh, wait, what? What is going on? Alter. See what happens. Uh-oh. Maybe just jacked up. All right. Cool. Anyway, the main thing we wanted to express to you all is that they've got these validators that you can use to validate the fields before they're actually saved in the database. And you got these built-in ones. You can create your custom ones right here, like so. There's these methods, like the FullClean method. And I'm not quite sure what Morgan was referring to, but that might also be something interesting. Clean underscore fields. But it was where you can actually clean a specific field by doing clean underscore or whatever that field name is. But just know that full clean validates all the fields in your model. The optional exclude argument lets you provide a list of field names to exclude from the validation as well. So if you only want to validate some fields, you can kind of see here, they're overriding the clean method here. So you're overriding the clean method. So perhaps if you overwrite the clean method, when you run full clean, it'll run your overrided clean method here. So look at model full clean, a model's clean method is not invoked when you call the save method. So when you just in your terminal, if you just save something to the database, it's not going to call the full clean. Does anybody have any questions about validators?
Just a quick terminology question. What is a code, a validator's code? I saw that in the docs. I'm pretty confused.
I am not familiar with that. Validator's code.
Yeah, I'll just look it up.
This part?
Exactly.
I am not sure. I've never dealt with this before. The code part. Code required. Invalid. It looks like it's related to whether or not there's the field is required or if something is invalid. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Maybe there's different codes that you can throw an error on, whether it's invalid or required or something like that. Not quite sure. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to